In this video, I'm going to go over Jethro Tull's discography, all their albums. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to give my own opinion of them. It's probably going to be different to a lot of other people. A lot of people hold up albums that Jethro Tull do very high, like things like This Was and Stand Up, which for me, I'm not a big fan of those albums. I tend to also I like some of the 80s stuff with the synthesizers. In fact, that's some of my favorite stuff. Also Aqualung. Aqualung is a fantastic album, but I don't necessarily put it at the top. Actually, I haven't been putting it at the top, but as I get older, I tend to appreciate Aqualung more and more. It's a very good album. But anyway, let's start from the beginning. So 1968, This Was. You know, I don't consider it a high on the list. For me, maybe it's my age. I know I'm old, but I tend to have a newer ear in a way. I'm not a big fan of 60s blues rock so much. It's a little bit repetitive. Blues in general to me is very repetitive. And blues rock is equally repetitive. So it's very difficult for me to put this album higher on the list when it comes to Jethro Tull. Having said that, as a blues rock album, it's it's one of my favourite blues rock albums. I think one problem is you don't have Martin Barr in the band yet. You've got Mick Abrahams, which is a blues guitar player. And he didn't last very long. He only lasted that one album for obvious reasons. He's a blues guitar player. Almost like, what's his name, Bob Close from Pink Floyd, before David Gilmour. Very early days of Pink Floyd, you had Bob Close, which was more of just a blues guitar player. So very repetitive style of playing, very economical way of playing, but just a very repetitive style of playing. However, you do have Ian Anderson in the album, of course, very important. You've got Glenn Cornick on bass, and you've got Clive Bunker on drums. So there you've got a fantastic drummer and a fantastic bass player. So you've got some great ingredients. My Sunday Feelings, the first song on the album, sort of a high-energy blues rock. Now, Dharma for One, I want to speak about that. That's an instrumental song. Here's the strange thing about Dharma for One. I'm not a fan of Dharma for One. It's an instrumental, almost like Moby Dick from Led Zeppelin, or Rat Salad from Black Sabbath. It's a drum solo song where you got, music around it. Not a big fan of Dharma for One. However, the album Living in the Past has a live version with Martin Barr in it. They play it in a different way. It's a lot more dynamic. They play it a lot more dynamically. It's so it's like dun 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 dun. It's a lot more dynamic. And it's got lyrics, it's got a vocal melody, and the vocal melody is fantastic. And in fact, the Living in the Past version of Dharma for One, the live version they do with singing, is one of my favourites. I love Dharma for One. So even though Dharma for One is on This Was, I'm not a big fan of it. The live version of Dharma for One is fantastic. It's also got a song for Jeffrey. A song for Jeffrey works. There's something about that song that is fantastic. I love A Song for Jeffrey. But besides that, I gloss over the album when I listen to it. It's not one of my favourites. So now we're going to 1969, the album Stand Up. Now we have an important ingredient. We've got Martin Barr. So I kind of knew Martin Barr had a big input into the sound, but I really didn't appreciate just how much input he had until I listened to Martin Barr's solo work, which is very progressive. So a lot of the progressive stuff is not only from, they've got John Evans on the piano, but they've also got David Palmer as well. These people putting, classical musicians, piano players, putting all this input into this rock music. But you've got Martin Barr, who's also putting all this progressive elements into it. Very interesting elements. You've got A New Day Yesterday, great song. You've got Bure, a classic instrumental. Now, there's a good instrumental. Bure, they redo a Bach piece in sort of like a layback jazz lounge sort of version, which is really, really cool. Back in the Family. It's starting to get progressive now. Nothing is easy. Nothing is easy to me. Is kind of like a gateway to the next album. Nothing Is Easy would have also worked in the next album. A high energy song, fantastic song. Fat Man. I love this song. When I was a kid, I loved how interesting it was. They used a different instrument. It had a different feel, an Eastern sort of feel. I love Fat Man. Very progressive, very cool. Fat Man is a great song. So this album's a strong album. Stand Up is a great album, and now they've got the ingredients. Jethro Tull now has the ingredients to do some killer work. And boy, do they do some killer work with the next release, 1970's Benefit. One thing I find interesting about Benefit is I love chasing musicians' equipment. Like, I'm a keyboard player and I love figuring out what do they use for this album. I'm obsessed. What did they use for that album? What did they use for that album? I even know what keyboards, Jethro Tull used through the 80s because I've just researched it and watched interview after interview where I can go, okay, I know what keyboards they're using for this and this. Same with guitar. I'm obsessed with, like, what guitar did they use for this? What guitar did they use for that? The interesting thing about Benefit, it has a fantastic guitar tone and fantastic guitar playing. It's a Les Paul, but it's not a real Les Paul. It's like a knockoff Les Paul. It just had like Gibson on the headstock. So Martin Barr thought it was a Les Paul. And the moment he discovered it was a fake, he got rid of it and got a real Les Paul. Now, even though obviously the real Les Paul sounded killer, for Minstrel in the Gallery and all that kind of stuff, and Thick as a Brick and all that kind of stuff, there's something about that fake Les Paul. I really wish Martin had held on to that, cheap copy, because the tone in Benefit is really, really good. I love the tone in Benefit. So Benefit opens up with one of the best Jethro Tull songs ever, With You There to Help Me. I can't even... I've done a cover of this song myself several times. I've even recorded a cover of this myself. I can't even put it into words. It's just the way it opens up. It's got like a chord progression with the guitar. It sort of comes in quietly and builds up, and it's got a flute, an echoing flute, a lot of intensity, and then the vocal melodies. Oh my God, you have to listen. If you haven't heard With You There to Help Me, to know what I'm talking about, you have to go listen to that song. That is an incredible song, and that song alone makes Benefit one of the best albums. Then you got Nothing to Say, another really cool song. This is full of great stuff. For Michael Collins, Jeffrey and Me, I'm a big fan of that song. To Cry You a Song, I mean, that's a classic. You've got some of the bonus songs, Witch's Promise, Teacher. An incredible album. Benefit is a really good album. Then after Benefit, they released their Dark Side of the Moon, their Stairway to Heaven. They released Aqualung. Aqualung, just on an interesting side note, the guitar riff for Aqualung is played on a Les Paul Jr. with a P90 pickup. Just thought that was an interesting point there. But anyway, and also the solo, I mean, this story's been told many times, when Martin Barr was performing the solo of Aqualung, Jimmy Page came and waved through the window from Led Zeppelin, the guitar player from Led Zeppelin. And Martin Barr just kind of turned around because he was focusing on the guitar solo. He didn't want to make any mistakes. He didn't want to start again because they were short on studio time. And I think they used that take. So that take where of Aqualung, the guitar solo, has Jimmy Page, waving at the same time. Now, again, these tracks, so you've got Aqualung, Cross-Eyed Mary. Now you are getting into prog rock territory. Even Iron Maiden has covered Cross-Eyed Mary. Cheap Day Return, Mother Goose, Wondering Aloud. Now, Wondering Aloud, not only is that an exceptional song, Wondering Again as well. That needs to be mentioned because Wondering Again, those two songs work as one song, Wondering Again and Wondering Aloud. And they have now released those two versions together. But I even prefer Wondering Again to Wondering Loud. Even though Wondering Loud's spectacular, Wondering Again is majestic. And it's not... Wondering Again, it's off Living in the Past. So it's kind of like just a B-side. Yet, to me, Wondering Again is one of the best Jethro Tull songs. Up to Me, fantastic. My God! The song My God again. I mean, it's one of those songs... If you haven't heard Jethro Tull My God, then My God, go listen to My God. A wonderful piece of music, very emotional, very expressive. Starts with an acoustic guitar and then just starts slamming with some rock. You've got Hymn 43, you've got Slipstream, and then you've got Locomotive Breath, which is kind of Jethro Tull's Smoke on the Water, isn't it? So yeah, very, very strong album. 1972, and in my personal opinion, is another step up from Aqualung. It's one of my favourite Jethro Tull albums of all time, and that's Thick as a Brick. Thick as a Brick is a concept album. It's really just one... it is multiple pieces of music strung together, but it's got the same theme going through it. It's presented as, I think, one or two pieces of music, just Thick as a Brick 1 and Thick as a Brick 2. But in that, you've got some of the best Hammond organ playing of all time from John Evan. Phenomenal. You've got some of the most melodic guitar playing from Martin Barr. And you've also got a very important addition to the band here. The drummer, Barrymore Barlow. In my opinion, the best drummer ever. In fact, John Bonham from Led Zeppelin has stated that Barrymore Barlow is the best rock drummer that England ever produced. And I agree. And here's an interesting thing. Very interesting thing. I got into... my dad was into Jethro Tull. My family was into Jethro Tull. As I was growing up, we listened to Jethro Tull. And then I got into my own music, and that included Yngwie Malmsteen, which is very different. It's kind of like... if you haven't heard Yngwie Malmsteen, it's almost getting a bit 80s sort of rock, metal almost. It's a bit like Deep Purple, but a bit more 80s. But Yngwie Malmsteen's first album, I never knew the drummer was Barrymore Barlow from Jethro Tull. So Yngwie used Barrymore Barlow to record his first album, which I thought was really interesting. The track listing, I mean, it's a one piece of music, but it's kind of got multiple sections. There's Childhood Hero is just it's something you need to listen to. You need to listen to the whole lot of this album. It's fantastic. And Believe in the Day. Believe in the Day. I sometimes just put on this album and just go straight for Believe in the Day. Because it's so ethereal, and Believe in the Day is so ethereal and haunting and emotional. Believe in the Day. In fact, Believe in the Day's, one of the reasons why I love this album so much. You could go on. The Poet and the Painter. This album's unbelievable. This Thick as a Brick is a majestic piece of work. Then they go on to 1973's Passion Play. Not, in my opinion, not as good as Thick as a Brick, but still a solid album. You've got Skating Away on the Thin Ice on this album. But one thing I will just briefly mention from Passion Play is how experimental they got, and I love surprises in music. In fact, that's what got me into prog rock, was when my dad put an album, Yes album, 90125 on the record, on vinyl. And vinyl used to scratch. So sometimes if you had to scratch, it would repeat, and you would have to, move it. It would go did it would repeat. I was listening to Yes, the song Changes. And it's got this odd rhythm in there. And I thought there was a scratch on the record. So I went to go and move the needle to get past the scratch so I can continue listening to it. But it went into the verse, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's obviously done it itself, and now it's playing the song, so I just sat back. But then it came to that section again with that odd time singing, and I was like, oh my God, they're deliberately playing a broken, like they sound broken, like the record sounds broken. And that was at a very young age. It would have been 7 or 8, but it opened up my mind musically. I'm like, wow, you can do anything in music. And in fact, you should do anything in music to create all these surprises, all these moments of like, what the hell is going on? And that's what happens in Passion Play. You've got the song the story of the hare who lost his spectacles. The story of the hare who lost his spectacles. So first time I heard that, I'm a truck driver. I was driving my truck, and I put on Passion Play. And then suddenly I thought, have I accidentally put on a different... like, is the album finished and it's now playing, a kid's show? Is it gone to the Wiggles or something? What's going on? Or is it gone... has YouTube turned on and there's like a kid's show or something? And I looked down, and sure enough, it was the Jethro Tull album. And I'm like, oh my God, this is in this album? Like, they deliberately put a piece of music... It's amazing. I love the story of the hare who left his spectacles, because it's such a strange... left turn, and musically it's interesting. With like classical instruments. What an amazing album. Passion Play, what a surprising and interesting album that is. So yeah, Passion Play. Now 1974, you've got War Child. Now there's something about this album I'm not overly fond of. Although there's some extremely good songs. Bungle in the Jungle, again, like Fat Man, it's an interesting upbeat song. I love Bungle in the Jungle. I'm into those Jethro Tull pop songs. They're really cool. When Jethro Tull does a pop song, God, they're the master of pop. Even though they're a progressive rock band, Ian Anderson is the master of pop. So Bungle in the Jungle's cool. Skating Away on the Thin Ice, again, another really, really cool poppy, hooky song. Track 5 off this album, Sea Lion, a proper prog rock killer song. Love Sea Lion. Also, the opening, I love it. You've got the air raid sirens, you've got a guy, I think, having sort of breakfast, and there's drama there. There's no music yet. And then you've got sort of like maybe 1920s radio, wireless sort of music coming in, and creates a lot of intensity. I love how this album opens. And then you've got the song War Child, which Initially, I wasn't a fan of it. It kind of goes very dramatic intro with the air raid sirens, but then War Child as a song, it's kind of a little bit jolly to me. It's kind of like doesn't fit. I mean, the more I listen to it, though, I am starting to appreciate it more. After War Child, in 1975, Jethro Tull releases one of the greatest pieces of rock music ever recorded, and to this day is one of the best pieces of rock music, progressive rock music, you'll ever hear. The album Minstrel in the Gallery. Now they're starting to get a little bit more medieval. Medieval themes in this song, even some medieval like musicality. Minstrel in the Gallery, I believe, is extremely a Martin Barr song. It's that prog rock, guitar player who loves prog rock. Martin Barr, who's into kind of like classical music and like me, into classical music and maybe a bit of jazz and just interesting, wants to take him in an interesting direction. Minstrel in the Gallery is fantastic. You've got these performers, medieval performers, playing for, royalty, I suppose, and they're chatting away. Blah, 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 blah. These two musicians are kind of chatting away, just like an ordinary day. For your entertainment, and then people are clapping, and then the minstrel in the gallery. So he's got this kind of like strumming, very cool chord progression. One thing I've got to say about Ian Anderson is he's a god of chord progressions. Even to this day, I've recently done covers of modern Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson solo work, and his chord progressions, as ever, are equally as complex. And he uses things like changes from a minor chord or like a major chord. He'll be on a major chord, then he'll change to a minor chord, the same chord. So he might be on like A major and then A minor, and it just creates so much drama. You don't think to do that. I don't think to do that. I do know they do it a lot in classical music, and I want to try and create music that's a lot more like that, but to me, it's just you've got to be so creative to do that and pull it off. I mean, and that's what he does. Ian Anderson pulls off these incredible chord progressions. Minstrel in the Gallery, I think he is hitting sort of like, I don't know if it's an A, he might have the capo on, I think he does, but he's hitting an A shape. Happy sound and then sad sound. Really good. And then it goes into the electric guitar comes in, and you've got, again, my favourite drummer of all time, Barrymore Barlow with the cowbell doing this incredible drum beat. Minstrel in the Gallery is one of the best songs, one of the best prog rock songs of all time. Then, track 2, Cold Winter Valhalla. Another killer, acoustic, more of an acoustic, themed on sort of Norse mythology. Cold Winter Valhalla. And it's got this, rapid sort of acoustic guitar thing. I love Cold Winter Valhalla. Equally strong song for me. I just love Cold Winter Valhalla. And then you've got Black Satin Dancer, which is interesting because Black Satin Dancer's kind of got a more modern... I mean, it was 1975. Yet later on in the career, when you've got albums like Catfish Rising and Rock Island and all that kind of stuff, Crest of a Knave, you've got this kind of... I don't know how to describe it. Sort of old man's... cocktail bar blues, I suppose. Black Satin Dancer's kind of like this cocktail blues style that you would have expected to hear in, early 90s Jethro Tull, not 1975. That's an interesting song. Black Satin Dancer is ahead of its time for me. You've got Baker Street Muse, you've got One White Duck. I mean, this is a home run. This for me puts Jethro Tull at the top, the pinnacle of prog rock, of music in general. The next album, 1976, is Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Now, this isn't a horrible album. In fact, my late brother, who passed away a couple of years ago, he was a big fan of the first opening song, Quiz Kid, which is kind of a bit of a prog rock, but it has almost a feeling of like Grease Lightning, that it's kind of got a 50s Grease Light. I don't know what it is about it. It reminds me of a musical, some sort of a musical, but Quiz Kid, it's kind of a prog rock musical, and I suppose it is. It's telling a story of a guy that's, an old rocker that wants to keep rocking, and all his friends are, either passed away or married with kids or whatever, but he wants to keep rocking and he's depressed. And that's what the theme of the album, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, is meant to be about. And then the title track, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. For me, I'm happy to have this album just for those two songs, for Quiz Kid and for Too Old to Rock and Roll, because I love that song, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. I suppose it could be just for the fact that my father used to listen to it growing up. I might just have a real connection with it. But yeah, I love that album. The other tracks in the album, like Taxi Grab and all that kind of stuff, and From a Deal, Beat to an Old... These songs are they don't connect with me as much. I kind of gloss over them a bit when I listen to the album. But it's not a bad album, and it's got a couple of good songs in there. But then in 1977, a year before I was born, Jethro Tull releases what I would consider maybe my favourite Jethro Tull album of all time. The best Jethro Tull album of all time. Yeah, that could sit up there at the top. Even better than Aqualung, I'm sorry, but I would consider it better than Aqualung. Songs from the Wood. Songs from the Wood. Not only does it have very strong songs, but it has lots of very strong songs from the beginning to the very end. Opening up with Songs from the Wood. Let me bring you songs from the wood. Vocal harmonies. Then the acoustic guitar comes in. You've got flutes. You've got a medieval theme to this album. Very, very medieval. Songs like Velvet Green. Listen to Velvet Green and also pay attention to the whole song. It's Velvet Green, to me, that's up there with Minstrel in the Gallery as one of the best Jethro Tull songs. I do believe it's very, there's a lot of input from David Palmer, or Dee Palmer, as she's known today, because it's got a lot of those harpsichord, Bach-inspired classical and medieval themes that I believe comes from David Palmer. And potentially Martin Barr as well. Not to mention Ian Anderson. Behind all this, orchestrating all this, putting all this together, is obviously Ian Anderson. I can't. When I mention the other musicians, I'm not saying Ian Anderson isn't contributing. In fact, Ian Anderson is the main driver behind all this. But he's also got some very powerful allies. Then you've got Jack in the Green. I love Jack in the Green. I mean, I'm not even going to go explain these songs. You have to listen to them. Cup of Wonder. Hunting Girl. I mean, that's a high-energy prog rock song with an incredibly mind-blowing drum fill. Towards just after the middle of the song. They go back into the organ bit, and then the guitar riff. A drum roll that goes through. I don't know how many drums he's got on that thing, but it sounds like it's starting up. Maybe there's rototoms or something. He's got maybe a few rototoms, and then goes all the way around the drum kit. Just like a machine gun. And also the tone of the drums really emphasize it too, especially when you've got those high toms. I don't know if they're rototoms, with really resonant. I sometimes just put on that piece of song and go to that drum fill and listen to that drum fill, because that is the best drum fill ever. Ring Out Solstice Bells. It's got a very sort of, got a Christmassy feel, like a pagan Christmassy sort of feel. Love Ring Out Solstice Bells. Now, I've got to admit too, a lot of the reason I probably love these types of songs is my dad played them non-stop. Songs from the Wood was played non-stop, and he would listen to songs like Ring Out Solstice Bells, especially when it was Christmas and stuff like that. So growing up, I always heard them, I always loved them. Then you've got, obviously, what I talked about before, Velvet Green is just... If you haven't heard Velvet Green, just stop. Just go and listen to Velvet Green. Then you've got Pibroch. And then you've got another song, The Whistler. So The Whistler. When I was a child and I heard The Whistler, I don't know if they put it out as a single, but it should have been a single, because it had a really cool film clip. It's a very cool song. It's got sort of like a festive, baroque, medieval sort of Renaissance sound to it, especially with the whistle, the way the whistle melody. Again, I suspect that this has got a lot to do with David Palmer, because David Palmer does compose a lot of that Bach and Renaissance music and all that kind of stuff. Potentially, David Palmer had a big hand in the song The Whistler. But again, the song The Whistler is another top song. I'm not going to say any more. I could go on forever about this album. Songs from the Wood, the greatest Jethro Tull album of all time. After releasing Songs from the Wood, they release another really strong album in Heavy Horses. The song itself, Heavy Horses, it's up there with one of my favourite Jethro Tull songs. If the rest of Heavy Horses was as strong as the song Heavy Horses, it would probably be better than Songs from the Wood. But even though it's got phenomenal music, Acres Wild, fantastic, Moths, this is a great album. But to me, it's not quite up there, just misses slightly. Like overall, it just misses slightly. It doesn't quite hit where Songs from the Wood hit. Yet, the stronger songs on this album, hit as hard as Songs from the Wood. So Heavy Horses, yeah, fantastic album. 1979, Stormwatch. Stormwatch, what an album Stormwatch is. Again, potentially one of my favourites. It's up there. It's definitely up there. It's starting to get a bit more rocky. It's starting to sound a little bit more, sort of what happened during Crest of a Knave. It's starting to pick up here a little bit, rock-wise. It's starting to get a bit more heavy rocky. You got North Sea, the North Sea Oil song. In North Sea. You got Orion. So really strong opening. Home, track 3. That is an emotional song. It's a mellow song, but geez, that just shows Ian Anson's ability to really pull at your heartstrings with the song Home. So it's a mellow song, but it really is like Comfortably Numb from Pink Floyd. It's just a very emotional song. Home, yeah, underrated song. Dark Ages. Dark Ages is another home run. That is a phenomenal song. It's about the Dark Ages, and it's aggressive. It's an aggressive, progressive rock song. Dark Ages. Dark Ages I would buy Stormwatch just to hear the song Dark Ages. Warm Spore and the instrumental, very nice instrumental. I love this instrumental. And then you've got the next song, Something on the Move. So just as where you expect most albums to sort of die off, they lift it back up again with Something on the Move, which is a really hard-hitting sort of high-energy rock song. Great guitar playing and guitar riffs from Martin Barr. And then they're not over yet because they've got Dun Ringle, which is an acoustic piece. And it's probably my favourite acoustic piece of Ian Anson's music is Dun Ringle. Dun Ringle's a powerful song, and it could also be when I was young. I saw the film clip when I was a child, and I just remember being captured by that melody. In the wee house I'll meet you, down by Dun Ringle, I'll watch the old gods play, by Dun Ringle. Dun Ringle, again, going through this album, looking at the songs, it's no less of an album than Songs from the Wood. The only sad part of this record is it's the end of the lineup there. So Barrymore Barlow, the greatest drummer of all time, it's his last album. And I think that's got a lot to do with the death of the bass player, John Glasscock, who was only in the band for a few albums, but phenomenal bass player. And you've got the best rhythm section in rock music with John Glasscock and Barrymore Barlow. And then you've got the exit of everyone. Basically everyone exits with the exception of Martin Barr. So even Dee Palmer's out now. Dee Palmer's gone. Barrymore Barlow's gone. John Evans gone. John Evan moved to my country in Australia, and I think he works in construction. I'm a truck driver in construction in Australia, and that's where John Evan is. But anyway, interesting. He moved to Australia. David Palmer, I should say, went and transitioned into Dee Palmer and still creates great music. She's not very active. But there's a song, Forever Albion, off her album. I love her album, Dee Palmer's album. And the song Forever Albion is one of my favourite songs. I love the song Forever Albion, which is Dee Palmer's music. Also in this album, Stormwatch, they play one of my favourite pieces of medieval music, which is Pastime with Good Company. I think they call it King Henry's Magical. And so they do a really good cover of that. I often play that song. I love it. It's melodic minor, kind of like Greensleeves. There's something about Greensleeves when you first learn it. It's like minor, but then it's got a major sort of raised note. It's melodic minor. That's what's going on there. That's what's going on with Greensleeves. That's what's going on with Pastime with Good Company. It's melodic minor. And I also have heard Richie Blackmore with his sort of Renaissance band do a cover of that same song. So yeah, Stormwatch, end of an era, and what a powerful end to an era. On a personal note, when CDs came out and they started to put them out and they came to Australia, my dad had this on record, on vinyl, and I found a copy on CD, and I told my dad, and he gave me some money. He said, can you go buy it? But unfortunately, my dad passed away. So I have a strong connection with this album because my dad he was listening to CDs by that stage, and he didn't really get the records out. But this was his favourite, one of his favourites, probably his favourite Jethro Tull album. And he wanted to hear it on CD, but unfortunately he passed away before I could get it for him. So I have a strong affiliation with this album just on that respect as well. Now the next album was supposed to be an Ian Anderson solo project. By the way, some of Ian Anderson's albums, like Into the Light and Homo Eroticus. Homo Eroticus is up there with some of the best Jethro Tull. To me, Homo Eroticus is a lot better album than The Zealot Gene, for example. It's the same group of people. And one's a solo project, Ian Anderson solo project, and the other one's a Jethro Tull album by the same people. Yet, Homo Eroticus by Ian Anderson is a way better album than The Zealot Gene. Like, by far. I love Homo Eroticus. But anyway, so they break up. Now, this is an interesting one. The album A. So, a lot of people don't like this album. I can see why. The songs aren't as strong, but they are good. If you're into prog rock, which I am, I particularly love this album. Especially songs like Black Sunday, which is just a home run. Black Sunday is a home run of a progressive rock song. It's beautiful. It's brilliant. It's the masterpiece that makes this album so good. But also, why I kind of have a strong attachment to this album is because I love early prog rock. I love Alan Holdsworth and I love Yes. I love Bill Bruford. Now, Bill Bruford from Yes, he went into King Crimson, but then he joined an album. Bill Bruford joined up with Alan Holdsworth. What a combination! And John Wetton. So they got together with John Wetton, from Asia, from King Crimson, and they got together with Eddie Jobson. So Eddie Jobson's been in a lot of, played with a lot of musicians. Played with Fairport Convention, I believe, Roxy Music, and UK. UK did one album called UK with Alan Holdsworth. And it's one of the best prog rock albums of all time. And the first song, In the Dead of Night, has the best guitar solo, I think, of all time. But the keyboard player, Eddie Jobson, phenomenal. He's even played with Frank Zappa. Joined with Jethro Tull to do this album. And I can hear a lot of the UK, the sound of UK, all that prog rock in this album, which is why I love this album. It's a good album. So the next album, 1982, and we're not getting weaker, are we? We're not declining here. We're still putting out some killer music. This was with keyboard player Peter John Vitesi, who worked miracles on this album, by the way. Broadsword and the Beast. In fact, Broadsword and the Beast, the song, was the main song that we played at my father's funeral, because my dad loved this album so much. Opens up with Beastie, which is just a great song. The Clasp. I've actually recorded put on YouTube a section from The Clasp, because I love The Clasp. It's one of my favourite songs. Fallen on Hard Times. This is a great album, Broadsword and the Beast. The song Broadsword that we played at my father's funeral. Pussy Willow, the next song. That's a killer song. Pussy Willow is a killer song. It also has like a B-side on this that is the best Jethro Tull pop song ever, Overhang. You need to hear Overhang. Overhang is perfect. Overhang is a perfect song. So this album, again, Broadsword and the Beast, it's got that sort of medieval theme to it. It's starting to get a little bit more 80s sounding, a little bit more polished. It's definitely rockin' hard. It's got the synthesizers, not overdone though, done in moderation. Very nice Roland sounding synthesizers like the Jupiter 8. Martin Barr still going strong in this album. Martin Barr, some of his best playing in this album. Broadsword and the Beast is one of the best Jethro Tull albums in my opinion. Now, after Broadsword and the Beast, which is such a strong album, using the same sort of lineup, you've still got a Peter John Vitesi. Under Wraps. They release Under Wraps, which is 1984. And something is a bit miss here. Something's a bit of a miss here. The reason I'm mentioning the lineup is they've got the same ingredients as Broadsword and the Beast. They got Peter John Vitesi, Dave Pegg. There's another person I forgot to mention on bass. Dave Pegg for Broadsword and the Beast, also for this album. From Fairport Convention, a great band that I've always loved. Fairport Convention, kind of folk rock, almost like Jethro Tull, but maybe a bit more on the mellower sort of side, and a bit more folky. But Dave Pegg from Fairport Convention played with Jethro Tull on this album. And also Dave Pegg did mention about this album Under Wraps, that if they had have taken the cut material from Broadsword and the Beast, like all the songs that they didn't use on Broadsword and the Beast, that would have made a better album than Under Wraps. And I think there's a couple of factors with Under Wraps. Not to say that the songs are bad. Again, Ian Anderson's, composing all the songs. Really good songs, really a lot of potential. If you took the songs from Under Wraps and you represented them, if you took Under Wraps and added some drums, a good drummer, got a good drummer to record the drums, because it's all drum machine. It's all synthesizer, overdone synthesizer, which they had in Broadsword and the Beast, but it wasn't done so heavily. The problem with Under Wraps is the fact that they've just overdone it with the electronics. They've gone overboard with the drum machine. They've gone overboard with the digital everything, just everything digital. And the production. Under Wraps has that kind of digital hissiness about it. It's not produced very well. It's got good songs, as I said before, and in fact, one of the songs off the album, Lap of Luxury, I love that song. It's a favourite. It's a Jethro Tull favourite. So even the worst album, Under Wraps, well, it's not their worst album, but even an album that's so low on the pecking order there, still, a song like Lap of Luxury is still good. I even have that album just for the sake of the Lap of Luxury. I love the song Lap of Luxury. So yeah, Under Wraps, unfortunately, is after all these really strong albums they've done, I think Under Wraps is a little bit of a miss. Ian Anderson at this stage was starting to develop vocal problems. He'd gone from the best he'd ever sounded. So when you look at Stormwatch up until Broadsword, that era, his vocals are just phenomenal. Phenomenal singer in that period. Wow. But then his voice started to develop problems. Potentially, there's different reasons why. Could just be the nature of being a singer for that long. I think Ian Anderson says it has a lot to do with the smoke machines. I also tend to think that it's got to do with the glottal, the way he sings, especially around that era. Like if you look at the tour of Under Wraps tour, he starts to really push hard every song. He's doing that glottal compression constantly, night after night. And he's also on the flute. So he's constantly smashing his vocals, night after night, year after year. And so I think he got surgery on his voice, and his voice hasn't been the same since, and it's declined over the years, to the point where today, unfortunately, there's not much left of his voice. He still works around it. When he puts an album out, it still sounds good, but they just have to work around it. And obviously, he doesn't have the voice that he had when he was younger. And consequently, on the next album, Crest of a Knave, the vocals are a little bit different. So he's not going up to the high reaches that he was in, Broadsword and the Beast and, Stormwatch. He's got using a bit of a lower register now, sounding a little bit more like Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. In fact, this album has very much a Dire Straits sort of feel to it. Some people, I think, call it the Dire Straits album, which is not a bad thing. It's not, and especially when you hear songs like Budapest. The instrumentation in Budapest is uncannily resembles, Dire Straits' Private Investigator, or Investigation, whatever the song's called. I think the production of it is starting to become a little bit dated. It does need to be refurbished. The same way Pink Floyd took Momentary Lapse of Reason and polished that up to what it should be. That's what Jethro Tull really needs to do with Under Wraps. They need to do that with Under Wraps, and I think potentially they do need to do it with Crest of a Knave as well. It's starting to sound a little bit dated in its production, but the songs are really good. There's plenty of guitar. It's a really rockin' album. Opens up with Steel Monkey, really great. Great rockin' song with the synclavier. So it's a mixture of technology and rock. It's a great song. And Farm on the Freeway, fantastic song. Jumpstart, more upbeat sort of, I think this was the single. Jumpstart, Tell Me Away. That's got a film clip to it. Great song. And also these songs do have progressive elements. So, it's got really good instrumentation. All of it. Steel Monkey, Farm on the Freeway, Jumpstart, Budapest. They all have surprises in the middle where they go off on some different direction, which is what I love about prog rock. She said she was a dancer, so like more of a ballady, sort of a bluesy, old man ballady sort of pop song. Good song. And then you've got Budapest, which for a long time, for me, Budapest was one of their best songs. Budapest has like a progressive instrumentation. Almost Dream Theater before Dream Theater, but a mellow version of Dream Theater. But on top of that, the songs a great song anyways. And then you've got Mountain Men, great song. Where the mountain men are kings. The cover art on this album is fantastic. The songs are fantastic. The instrumentation's fantastic. The guitar playing. This is a really good album. I think the other thing with Christopher Nave as well is I just think having Eddie Jobson come in to do A, and then having Peter John Vitesi after that. I think over that decade and whatever, I think Ian Anderson's really started to learn a lot about using synthesizers and sequences and all that. Peter John Vitesi wasn't part of this album, and indeed Ian Anderson was doing all the synthesizer stuff, or majority of the synthesizer stuff, all the programming, all the drum machines. There is a little bit of drum machine in this album as well. Ian Anderson was doing all that himself. In 1989, after Christopher Nave, they released Rock Island. Now, Rock Island and the album after this was very, very played on at home. My dad loved these albums. They got that kind of, as I was talking about before, you know, the cocktail bar old men sort of bluesy rock music. This is kind of old man bluesy rock music. This album in particular, I used to kind of like it a little bit, but I think it's a bit plain. And I do prefer the next album a little bit more. They're very similar. I kind of put these albums together, but the next album's just a little bit better. It opens up with Kissing Willie, which is probably the best song on the album. It's not an overly strong song, but it's not a weak song. It's a decent song. Then you've got the Rattlesnake Trail. So, Undressed to Kill, Rock Island. All these songs, you know, there's nothing that really jumps out. So, to me, this is kind of a pretty weak album. I don't really play this album very often. I've heard this album a lot, but I don't tend to put it on. I'm not really a fan of this album. 1991, Catfish Island. Similar vein to the last record, that kind of old man blues rock. I'm thinking of, when I say that, I'm thinking of kind of like Gary Moore when he started playing blues, that sort of Gary Moore style rock. This has got that sort of same, you know, Dire Straits, Gary Moore sort of bluesy rock, sort of late 80s, sort of early 90s old man blues rock. One thing I do like about Catfish Rising is the cover art, that sort of mother of pearl catfish that sort of comes out of the water, kind of comes out of the water with the Jethro Tull, you know, with that really nice font that they use. Regardless of the fact that this album isn't one of their best, I really love the cover art on this album. It's a really good piece of cover art. And these songs are pretty good. So it opens up with This Is Not Love. Personally, I love that song. It's just a really rockin' pop song, you know, a heavy rock pop song. Really good song. Occasional Demons, I don't mind that. That's starting to delve more into the, you know, very much blues, old man blues. Occasional Demons too. It's just that, definitely that sort of old man blues sort of rock. Rocks on the Road, good song. Thinking Around Corners, I like the because of bluegrassy with I think like a banjo or maybe a steel guitar. Not a bad song. Still Love You Tonight, definitely cocktail blues ballad song. Doctor to My Disease is that sort of calling Elvis, is anybody home? That old man blues rock. Tall Thin Girl, same. Sparrow on the Schoolyard Wall. This is a good song. I love that one, especially the drumming in it. Kind of, the drum changes pace. It kind of comes in with a slower pace, and then and then it's later on it goes into the slower section again. Really good groove to it, and then it changes pace. And the way they do it is really, really good. I love Sparrow on the Schoolyard Wall. That's a great song. Roll Your Own. Roll Your Own's a good song. It's not as good as Sparrow on the Schoolyard Wall, but it's not a bad song. So, you know, this album, it's not a bad album. It's pretty good. I don't think the average Jethro Tull fan would necessarily like it, unless you're really like a hardcore fan. But comparing Catfish Rising to Rock Island, it's a step up for me. In fact, I do often listen to this album. So, yeah. In 1995, they released an album, Roots to Branches. This album has taken a little bit of time to grow on me, but I do like it. It's a good album. When it first came out, I kind of liked it, especially the first couple of tracks, because in the mid-90s, a lot of that sort of Middle Eastern sort of, that, you know, that sort of sound was more prominent in rock. So all that stuff that Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin laid down, all those sort of Eastern sounds, were making a resurgence in the mid and late 90s. Bands like the Tea Party, I think even Tull, you could even say Tull was doing that sort of stuff. A lot of Eastern sort of sounds. And this album has that sound as well, especially the opening track, Roots to Branches. Really cool, very heavy. You almost call it like a heavy... This is probably more in the realm of heavy metal than Crest of a Knave. So, you know, it's a heavy Eastern sounding, produced really well. This album's produced very, very well. So you got Roots to Branches, the first track, really powerful, really good song. You got Rare and Precious Chain, which is same Eastern sound but a different song. That's really cool. The second song's really cool. Another interesting one is Wounded, Old and Treacherous. That's Frank Zappa. When I first heard that, I was like, oh my god, Ian Anson's been listening to Frank Zappa. It's very, very, very Zappa. And in fact, it sounds like Ian Anson is literally just quoting, trying to sound like Zappa. It's a great song, but it's definitely a Zappa sort of song. Another great song is Beside Myself. It's got very heavy content. It's a song about, you know, in not so fortunate areas of the world where younger people end up in unfortunate situations. You need to hear the song to know what I'm talking about, but a great song. This song kind of reminds me of Tori Amos. Beside Myself has a Tori Amos feel to it, especially with the piano. Andrew Giddens is on keyboards here, and I think maybe that's got a lot to do with his style. I know Andrew Giddens plays a lot of classical music and sort of from the romantic sort of era, so, you know, Eric Satie and all that kind of stuff. And I think that sort of music, almost jazzy, it's heading towards jazzy, implemented in rock, and you end up with that sort of Tori Amos feel. It's got a Tori Amos feel, almost Kate Bush, Tori Amos, more Tori Amos, but yeah, interesting song, really good song, and pretty good album. 1999, jtull.com. So I've tried to listen to this album. It's probably the worst Jethro Tull album. It's unlistenable, yet you've got Andrew Giddings on keyboard, you've got Martin Barr, you've got Don Perry still on drums. It's produced really well. It's kind of got rock moments, but it's just uninspired. There's nothing about it that grabs you. It's like, oh, there's nothing, when you're listening to it, there's no moments where you're like, wow, now we're talking. It's just very bland. It's kind of feels like it's been just thrown out, rather than, you know, coming up with music in an organic process. It sounds like they just sat down and said, let's write some songs. I do believe, I've heard several times that this album was supposed to be a marketing thing for their website, jethrotull.com. And it sounds like that. It just sounds like they just had to throw out an album for some reason. This is, the worst Jethro Tull album. It's got good musicians. It's produced well. Just the music is uninspiring, completely uninspiring. I've put on this album a couple of times, and nothing in it has grabbed me. It's that bad. 2003, they put out Jethro Tull, the Christmas album. It's better than the album before it. They redo songs, a song from Songs from the Wood. So they redo Solstice Bells, Ring Out Solstice Bells. They do, you know, Christmas carols, but they do it really good. They do it good. I would say most people probably miss this album because it is a Christmas album. So it's not, you know, it's not your average Jethro Tull album. You know, it's probably down the bottom of the list. It's not a horrible album, but it just doesn't have much. It just doesn't have much function. So after a break, that was the last album they put out for a long time. Almost 20 years. There was a gap of 20 years. I mean, that's a long time. I remember when the album 20 Years of Tull came out, and thinking all that body of work that Jethro Tull had done in 20 years. If you think about what Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, the Beatles accomplished in 20 years, you've got a big gap here of 20 years with no Jethro Tull. I thought it was the end. I thought they're not going to do Jethro Tull. But they did with the release of the Zealot Gene. So they released the Zealot Gene in 2022 with one important missing ingredient. No Martin Barr. So Martin Barr's been in Jethro Tull since, I think, 69, like late 60s, and has contributed to the sound the whole growth of Jethro Tull. If you think of Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, all those, combinations of people that make the music, it's Ian Anderson, Martin Barre is Jethro Tull. So to release an album under the Jethro Tull banner without Martin Barre, yep. So I had a problem with that. I still have trouble coming to terms with that. I can't comprehend it. I'm not even going to talk about it. I can't comprehend it. However, this album is not too bad. I don't put it on very often, but the song Mrs. Tibbetts and the Zealot Gene itself. Mine is the Mountain. I do like that song in particular. That's quite a strong song. In fact, it's one of the songs I listen to the most off this album is Mine is the Mountain. Really cool. In fact, that when I heard that, I was thinking, okay, I can learn to live with this version of Jethro Tull. So I would say this album is okay. It's not the worst album, that's for sure. It's definitely not the best album. But it's nice to have Jethro Tull back after almost 20 years of no Jethro Tull. I should also say, though, the Ian Anderson album Homo Eroticus, in my mind, I look at that as a Jethro Tull album, and it's better than this album. It doesn't have the Jethro Tull label, but for all intents and purposes, it is a very good album. It's very Jethro Tull. It's got a whole sort of theme to it. It's got the sort of history of the history of England and Northern Europe. Done really well. Done very well with really good music. I almost would consider Ian Anderson Homo Eroticus as a Jethro Tull album, a really good one, even though it's not Jethro Tull. But Homo Eroticus is better than this album. And finally, their latest release for 2023, the Rock Flirt, or however it's pronounced, Umla Flirt. The whole concept of this was Norse mythology. So you've got songs, for example, Gunungagap, which Gunungagap is the great, expanse of nothingness. Kind of like the void before, there was nothing and then everything was created. You've got Wolf on Unchained, obviously referencing Fenrir, the wolf that bit off the hand of the god Tyr. So, the whole idea of this album, the whole concept is Norse paganism and Norse mythology. I like this album better than the Zealot Gene. I don't like it as much as Homo Eroticus, but this is a pretty good album. Done really well. Sounds like Jethro Tull. They've also got a good guitar player. Now, the guitar player is a young guy, Joe Parish James, which kind of surprised me because I had already seen him. I knew him as a sort of a YouTuber, a young guy on the guitar that did really good covers of songs. He did Gustav Holst's Mars Suite. The Mars Suite, that's where heavy metal came from, was Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath playing Gustav Holst's Mars Suite on the bass. And Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath overheard it, and that's where they started to create. That's where heavy metal was born, from infusing classical music in with blues rock. And so this piece of music, I saw, what's his name? Joe Parish James do a really good version of Gustav Holst's Mars Suite. So it's kind of interesting. I kind of knew Joe Parish James as a kind of a young YouTuber guy, guitar guy, and now he's in Jethro Tull. So that was quite interesting, yeah. He's a great guitar player, very good guitar player. He just seems... Martin Barre should be there. That's who should be... That's real Jethro Tull. But this album, not too bad. The only other problem I have with this album is the way that the concept of this album's done. So it's obviously got a Norse mythology feel. You've got Gunungagap referring to the emptiness, the void before everything was invented. You've got the All-Father, obviously referring to Odin. Hammer on Hammer, that's a Thor reference, obviously. Trickster, so Loki. You've got, what else you got on this one? You've got Wolf Unchained, so that's obviously referring to Fenrir, the wolf that bit the hand of Tyr, the god Tyr. It just seems a little bit literal. It seems like Ian Anderson got all the Norse mythology books out and just started coming up with material on North. Right, it wasn't done in a subtle way. The way Songs from the Wood or Mints from the Gallery or Heavy Horses or Thick as a Brick is done, their concept album's done in a very subtle way, in a clever, poetic way. This seems a little bit too literal. So I just think the way this has been done as a concept album, they should have done it in a more, sort of artistic, poetic way, rather than just a literal way of, okay, we'll do a song about Odin, let's do one about Thor. It's just too literal for me. Besides that, it's a relatively decent album. So there you go. That's my opinion on all the Jethro Tull albums. Thank you.